Tolerators, this is To All the Men I've Tolerated Before with Natalie, your weekly look at everyday misogyny. TikTok brought me another talented guest this week, and we are welcoming Toni Powell to the team. Toni is a classical music composer and has just dropped her composition, The Mourning After, on Spotify. She is here to talk about the way misogyny affects classical music and has impacted her musical career as a young Black woman. Toni, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me here, Natalie.
No problem. I'm super excited for you. It's always really fun to release something and then just have it out there.
Yeah, it's honestly the whole journey of releasing my music has been exhilarating. I'm not gonna lie, I was a bit surprised how much traction I got because I think coming from a family who kind of I was always taught to go to school, music, you're not going to make a living off of music. And I got a lot of support. So I think it's inspiring. And of course, I've been invited to your podcast. So thank you again.
No problem. We love to amplify the work of women and women making it happen on the show. And I think that's so interesting because I think a lot of people have that same take where it's like, my family told me that I had to go to school and it wasn't going to be music, art, dance, creating, whatever that was going to get me through life. And I always feel like I was like, I know, but then no one talks about the careers I worked in a theater, in an office, booking tickets and field trips and stuff. And that got me further into the creating process. And we have to just start being more open about what opportunities are actually out there in the creative fields.
Yeah, that's so true. I feel like, so my dad went to trade school, my mom went to college, has 2 master's degrees. And it's kind of interesting because they're like the polar opposite when it comes to, going into music or pertaining to college. Like my mom, she believes that it's very hard to be financially successful without college. My dad, on the other hand, he's like, whatever you do, whatever you put your heart to and put your work ethic, make sure your work ethic proves, it proves that, how do I say this? My dad would say, don't expect to have the reward of a hard worker if you're lazy. That's what he would tell me. And it's kind of hard because, I always did well in high school. However, my heart has always been to music. And I don't know, I definitely relate to you when you said that pertaining to theater, how much more you became successful in it. I didn't think I would get over close to 10K views, 10,000 views. People to this day still like my music, find my music, and it's sad, but I feel like whenever people tend to not go towards the college route, they get more judgment. They get told more, no more times than they are said yes. And I don't know. It's just, I'm still thinking. I'm just like in shock to this day because I told my sister, I was actually talking to her the other day. I was like, man, music is still getting strange shade. And as a kid, I used to watch Selena Gomez, Billy Cyrus. I'm thinking, oh my God, like they're big, they're famous. I want to be like that one day. But it seems so far away. So, I don't know.
Yeah, the whole college thing, I go back and forth on it because, it's rooted in such classism and capitalistic mindset, and there's only one way to do something and there's only one way to be successful. And I remember going to college and being next to people who I was like, these people could have gone straight into the workforce. Like, they don't want to be here. They don't want to be reading a book or doing any of this. And I feel like, especially now with all the cuts to the Department of Education and whether or not we're even valuing education, it's one of those catch-22s where we won't invest in our high schools, our middle schools, and our elementary schools, but we'll tell every kid that the only way to make a salary and have health insurance is to have a college degree. So make it make sense.
That's so true because, tell me why I ended up getting accepted to the school, right? Even when I graduated from high school, I had many colleges that offered me 6-figure scholarships. I did well in school. However, I dropped out, I would say, when I was 18 because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I couldn't help but feel like, growing up as the middle child, I was like, I'm not the oldest, but I'm not the youngest. So I learned something from my older sister, but I also learned what not to do from my younger brother. And I feel like because I did well in school and I always had a passion to learn, it's kind of been the expectation that, oh, she's going to do something big. She's going to go into doctor or maybe a lawyer. And it's kind of hard to verbalize my dreams uh, with verbalizing my dreams without being overwhelmed by anxiety. Because I feel like I tell people I want to be a musician, but some of them believe in me, but some of them are saying, they tell me, they're like, it might be hard, not a lot of musicians make it. I get told you don't have what it takes or you're not going to make it. And over time, I let those words get to me to the point where I didn't take myself seriously. And it's hard for people to take you seriously when you can't take yourself seriously. That was something I had to learn.
100%. And I try to be more mindful about how we talk about arts and creativity around kids. Like, for example, I was with my aunt and her grandkids one day, and they were playing with Play Doh. I think this was around when they were all still under the age of like 5. And one of them was like, when I grow up, my job is I'm going to make jewelry. And then my aunt right away went, that's a great hobby, but I don't know if it's a job. And I was like, God damn it. And I was like, and now Natalie has to get on her high horse. So I pulled up my TikTok and I showed her just accounts and videos of people making polymer clay earrings on TikTok. I go, and look, this woman owns her business. She makes these earrings. She puts these earrings on the internet and then she sells them. Now, did I go into how hard it is to be a small business owner? No, but I did tell her, I go, there are jobs where people do this. Someone has to design the earrings that we buy from Target. like we can do this. It's fine. And the way that we'll just like automatically shoot down kids out of the fear of something not being lucrative.
Yes. Oh my God, speak on it. That's so true. I feel like we tell kids to follow their dreams as long as it's realistic or regarded as realistic. And it's not fair because you have so many people who have the potential to be brilliant artists, brilliant musicians, or hell, even brilliant business people, but because they don't have the resources or their parents may not give them the resources to thrive in that field, they become limited, forced to work into something that they were never intended to do.
I recently found out that the only reason Marie Shelley could write Frankenstein that we teach in schools is because her friends supported her for a year. They were like, we'll take care of your bills and food and whatever for a year. And she was able to write one of the biggest novels slash became millions of movies of all time. And it's just like, if we, if, if we lived in a country that had those support systems in place where you didn't always have to worry about the grind, imagine the things that we would have come up with. And I feel like it's the time where like jobs were the scarcest, that music and art and books and everything, like I'm thinking like the Harlem Renaissance, the European Renaissance, like all of that stuff.
That's so true. It's funny you said that because I took college history in high school and we learned about the Great Depression. And during the Great Depression, I think FDR created a job for many starving artists to the point where they they were doing gigs and not only were they able to make great money from it, but their works became a monument, a big thing in history. Like it's so amazing. And I feel like the economy we are now, I'm not saying we're in a depression, but we are in a recession. And I think we're going to see a lot of art, great amount of artists that pour out of it. But it is scary because it's just scary to know how, with a snap of a finger, how everything could change so quickly. It's really sad.
We're on month 3 of a new administration, and already we're just feeling like the claw pressed down on us to be like, we're in a recession. We're not valuing education. We're taking away funding for museums. So I'm so worried about kids in school currently and like what they're going to even be able to experience through school because I remember probably the first time I went to an art museum was because we went on a field trip or something like that, you know?
That's true. I think literacy is a really key component in art, especially producing great art. I remember, I'll never forget, as a kid, I didn't know how to read at all. Like when I was in kindergarten, my teacher told my mom, she was like, if she can't read to catch up with other kids, she's going to get left back. And my mom being a teacher, she was like, no, I'm not letting none of my kids get behind. So she sat me down and made me practice for hours and hours. And the reason why I say this is because I think with so much stress, even during back then, I was born in 2004. So I grew up when the economy crashed down in the 2008 recession. I remember my parents stressing how they're going to get paid bills, but they still find a way. And the reason why I say that is because I think even though technology has improved, oh, excuse me, I'm so sorry. I can't wait in the background. I think it's so embarrassing. But with the rise of technology improving, I think it has made it easier for people to become literate, but in a way, it's also set back because it's hard for us to pay attention to ourselves because we're always paying attention to other people's lives. Even though I grew up in an age where social media just started happening, I was fortunate enough to have a time where I had parents who would tell me to put aside my phones, read a book for an hour, and then write what you think it is, right? What's the moral of the story? What's the theory? And I would say practicing this every single day not only helped refine my literacy in art, but it gave me an eye to know what's the difference between good art and bad art. And I feel like it's a controversial thing. I'm sorry if I seem like I'm straying from the topic, but I feel like this is a controversial thing because a lot of people say, I do agree that a lot of people think there's no such thing as bad art. And while that may be true, art, is very free form. There is objectively good art and then art that's, how do I say this? It's not bad, but it's still in the early stages of getting refined.
Exactly. Yeah. I think the best art has a point of view. And if you're never taught the point of view of others, how do you know your point of view?
Yeah, it's so true. That's so true. Oh my God. No, because I could literally talk about this for hours. Like, The Hunger Games was my favorite book series since the fourth grade. And as a kid, I'm like, okay, so kids have to fight to the death. I'm reading about President Snow, Katniss, the dynamic between them, a girl who's stuck in poverty, talking to a guy who's rich, and bringing all these kids from different economical situations for a game. And not only, it wasn't until years later, I was like, wow, this is deeply connected to our politics today. I didn't even know that even back then in history, Black kids, Black boys, and possibly Black girls as well, they would get recruited to do a game where they would have to fight each other physically in order to get a lottery. And that's why it's so important to stay in touch with literacy because art replicates life, you know? And had I not been an avid reader or even had my mom and dad sit me down to try to read until I got better, I probably wouldn't be decent as I am in art than I am now. And I like that you said that. I really think that's profound that you said that. If you don't understand the point of view of others, how can you understand yourself?
Well, and I think what I'm butting up against as I take like my screenwriting courses and my comedy writing courses and whatnot is that I waited until I was in my mid 30s and I had a real rooted, grounded knowledge of myself and my point of view and my what was going to be important to me in the art that I create. And then you have these people who just show up. And I'm like, oh, you just truly showed up. And it's like, what would you like to write about? And they're like, what would I like to write about? And I'm like, I really can't answer that for you. And I think and maybe this is a controversial take, but I think that we still get to, based on our taste levels, but also on craft, say when people have it and say when people don't, because I'm so snobby. I recently told my friend, I was like, I feel like I should be able to call HBO and revoke people's White Lotus privileges based on the stupid things that they say about White Lotus and how they don't get the point of it. Like,
Yeah, I heard about the TV show, but what is it?
so White Lotus, and hopefully we're doing an entire episode about it. It's about white tourism. So every season you're in a different colonized or um like preyed upon community. Like the first season was in Hawaii. This current season is in Thailand. And it's all about how the rich, wealthy people view this culture that they truly have no authority over. And then it's white people watching white people take over this culture or talk on this culture or whatever. And the things that go over people's head that they'll complain about in the show. And I'm like, that's Mike White's point. Like,
I think, it's interesting. I was talking to my boyfriend yesterday and we were talking about colonization and stuff. And it's so interesting. I basically, like, a lot of people think that racism is, it happened such a long time ago, but it is still occurring. And not only that, but you have to realize these white supremacists and allies of white supremacists, right? In order to kill other civilizations, to generally kill them, they have to kill themselves first. And it's way deeper. They have to kill their consciousness. Because no way in hell you can be okay with uprooting and destroying someone's lineage or civilizations, mass amount of civilizations forever, and to implement your own and then turn around and say, oh, but it's in our God-given right we can.
yes. And it's the very prideful audacity for me. Like, okay, let's take music. I work for my sister's house once a week so I can hold the baby should she need to pee. And and we've been watching comfort movies, so he'll have good taste. And this week we watched That Thing You Do, which I don't know if you're familiar with that movie, but it's Tom Hanks discovering this like doo-wop kind of 50s Motown group of white guys called the Wonders. And they have a one-hit wonder, That Thing You Do. And the drummer, he he's a white guy and he loves jazz and he wants to be a jazz drummer. So every time he talked about jazz, I was like, the original La La Land, everybody. Because I'm like, sir, get yourself out of jazz. Like,
You
sir.
know, it's true. It's sad in a way, but I'm glad you brought up music because as a kid, I didn't really, I always loved classical music. However, I was told that classical music is not a black people thing. They're like, what are you doing in like classical music? R&B, soul, gospel. Those are our genres. But it wasn't until, I learned over time that I learned not too long ago actually that there were black classical musicians in the day of Mozart. And did you hear me?
Yeah, I heard you.
Oh, okay, sorry. No, it was black classical musicians in the day of Mozart, and I think that healed something in me because as a kid, I was told that why are you going into music that your people didn't create, even with, and I don't know how to explain this. I think even with in terms of rock, it's hard to navigate in genres as today as a black woman, even though we progress or whatever, if we really did progress, because a lot of people, there are some black rock artists, especially black female artists who are the pioneers of rock music, but they will never get the credit because they're overshadowed by what's deemed as right, you know? And I think the movie Dreamgirls, it highlights this. It talks about the Jennifer Hudson, Beyonce, the girls, they made songs, but they never really got their credit in the beginning because, other groups were able to make a profit on their songs. And I think to connect that, the reason why I made classical music was because I don't believe in making music of one genre. I feel like that's limiting. I would love to, God's willing, make a song in every genre. but I really wanted to make classical music because I don't think of myself as a good singer. I feel like I'm decent, you know? But I would tell myself, I always want to make music that can sing for me.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And I think even with, I'm still navigating making my own sounds, but I really love to make music that connects to people. Almost sounds like it's singing itself. Like the song I made, The Morning After, I guess I can say what the project is about since we're tapping into music. The morning after symbolizes death in a metaphoric way. It's not death physically, but death spiritually. It's about the death of a person's character, the innocence of who they were before going through a hardship, whether it's the death of a relationship, divorce, whether it's the death of their innocence after being assaulted, or even, I don't know, even losing a loved one, which I did experience, two out of the three, because I'm not divorced, but my parents divorced when I was a kid, so. But meeting the morning after was therapeutic for me because at one point, music was the only thing that saved my life. I didn't have the best mental health, unfortunately, because I went through some traumatic stuff. And besides reading, I always pumped to music. Ever since I was a kid, I was 6. My dad would put on songs from the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. And just listening to people like Billie Holiday, Carla Thomas, Elvis Presley, Frank Sinatra, something about that music, I can't explain it. It just sung to me. It just spoke to me. It's, you know what I mean? Like the music. Have you ever had experience like,
So when I was teaching in an urban school in Dayton, the kids would always make fun of me because they'd come in the morning and I'd be listening to my Motown playlist. And I was like, I love the Supremes. I love, for one thing, my mom used to let me watch Dirty Dancing every night when I couldn't sleep. So a lot of that music is in that movie. And I love the Commodores and all of it. Like, there's nothing happier than Motown music.
Motown is the best? Oh my God.
Yeah, and I went and saw Motown the musical, the Broadway production, and I had the best time. And okay, one of my favorite artists is the Taylor Swift, and that that damn tortured poets album where it's like, this is about anger, this is about being sad that you're angry, this is about being angry that you're sad, this is about telling the people who build you up just to tear you down to fuck off. Like, that resonates with me as a woman because we love to watch a woman succeed right up until we've decided that she's reached too far, and then we shove her off the cliff like we did with Beyonce with Cowboy Carter. Like, well, how dare you try to be a country musician? And it's like, Beyonce can do it all. That's what makes her Beyonce.
Yeah. That's so true, though. I feel like, I love that you brought up Taylor Swift because ever since I was a kid, I loved Taylor Swift, especially with her Romeo and Juliet. Like, I listen to every freaking song of her. I love Taylor Swift, and same for Beyonce. And that's why I make music like, there's nothing wrong with making fun music, but I really love making music that's connected to politics because it they coexist. You can't have music without it pertaining to politics because it's hard to say. Even like learning about the history when in the early 1900s they would write comic books about things that are happening to this day. It's still art, and I try not to be stereotypical or refrain from stereotypes in my music and literary. Like I also write too, because I feel like the moment I make my art filled with stereotypes or prejudice, or for example, I'm sure you heard the angry black woman trope. You know, I don't watch movies anymore that depict those things because I feel like the moment you make art that revolves around that, stereotypes of different ethnic groups is propaganda in a way. And I don't know if you saw, they were calling Beyonce a propagandist because her Cowboy Carter, it was like about America, and America is the country that has its sins, which is due. But the problem with, I can say this as being a black woman artist, even my friends, they would say it's like Black women, we have a weird, unique standing in America. It's like we can't do too much because then we're seen as this cocky, uh, just annoying person to be around with. We can't be too confident. We can't be too loud about our gifts. Even Kamala Harris, when she ran for presidency, people hated her.
Yeah.
They said that she doesn't have what it takes. Too overqualified won't make you qualified. Too underqualified, it's not going to make you qualified. So it's a weird juxtaposition that I'm still figuring out. And it's just annoying because I really do love Beyonce. Her music, I feel like even you don't have to make, I don't know if I'm making sense right now, but I like Beyonce because I feel like even when her song Lemonade, she always made music that's relevant to the times. It resonates with you. So
Yeah, we did a whole episode on Cowboy Carter, and I think either I or my smarter friend Alrinthia or my smarter friend Julia said that the album in it of itself is a mass. Like you've gone to church with Beyonce. And there's some shit. She says some shit. And I said that my favorite part of that album was she's like, I go, it was like she was threatening us the entire time to not like this album. Like, I dare you to tell me that as a Black woman, I don't have any place in country music. I dare you. And I think that's so powerful. I think that currently in our current political landscape, and of course everything's political. Like I said this about the most recent season of Love Is Blind when a man was like, I just don't feel like my political and religious views being different than your political and religious views matter. And I texted my friends and I was like, the reason why white men have the privilege to say that everything's gotten too political or that it doesn't matter if I'm a conservative and you're a liberal, we can still coexist and have babies and whatnot, is
yeah,
because the things that I'm fighting for don't actually touch them. So of course
really,
they just get to ignore the fact that like I'm in support of Black Lives Matter and gay rights and feminism and all
yeah,
that. And they can be like, oh, pish posh, who cares about that? And it's like, well, the people that your people affect, the people who your people decide don't get to have rights. That's why we're fighting. And you're sitting there going, it's fine if you're fighting. I just don't feel like I have to.
yeah. That's so true. And okay, this kind of disgusts me, but I used to be a little conservative. I didn't know any better. I was 16.
We
I'm
all had
way
a
liberal.
conservative
Yeah,
moment.
I was way liberal. But I, and this is why I make the music I make today, because I was very religious. I grew up in a religious household. I don't align with any religious beliefs. I'm agnostic anyways. But the reason why I tie back to it is because I remember watching these people on YouTube and like saying Trump is like the savior. He's anti-LGBTQ, so that makes him like this really whole saint, right? And I'm thinking to myself, I have gay people in my family. So I feel like when I was 16, that's when I started to question things. And I'm like, I don't like how they're speaking about gay people. So that's strike number one. And then two, I'll never forget, it was when George Floyd, the Black Lives Matter, he was murdered by police officers. And I was watching this church, which I had been watching for years now. It was this white pastor. And he said, I don't know why people are looting, destroying businesses, all for some guy. And it really struck a nerve in me because I'm like thinking, oh my God, like, no way you can be a pastor and have this credit for a man like that. And it's sad because, Black Americans, religion is deeply embedded in that culture. Every Sunday we go to church. Not going to Sunday is like a scandal in itself in some churches because they're like, oh, you don't really care about God like that. You're a heathen, all that stuff. And the reason why I say that is because it's really hard because religion is embedded in African American music history. So it's kind of like, it's a beautiful thing, but also it's a beautiful thing, but can also be sad because knowing the history of how Christianity was introduced to Africans and how there's that guilty conscience for those who choose to leave from the religion, because it's hard to still feel connected to a community that worships something that doesn't resonate with you, you know? Um, there's not many Black atheists or agnostics I know. And I keep that to myself because it's a taboo subject. And I feel like the way that we adore God, we all not adore God, but the way that, let me rephrase this, the way that Christians adore Trump, or no, the way that Republicans adore Trump is the same way they adore white supremacists. Because Christianity is so embedded into white supremacy. And that's why I decided to make music that I want to do. Because for about hundreds of years, everyone was taught to worship anything that was white. We were taught to separate from our culture, separate from our skin, bleach our skin, change our hair, our genetic makeup to even the thing that moved us intrinsically, like art, our rhythm, our blues. We were told, oh, too depressing, too strong, you can't sing it, but only for it to be replicated by the same people that told us to hate us. And I feel that's why I make classical music. That's why I make rock, because I'm reclaiming something that was once taken from my people. I'm not saying that white people didn't create classical music, because they definitely did make that genre, but I'm saying that in a sense, I add rock, I add classical, because there are Black musicians who also had a piece in making classical music to what it is today. And I feel like as a real artist, every artist goes through this. Not a real artist, because I'm still learning. I'm not some artist connoisseur, because there are many things I have to learn. But I feel like we all go through this time period, whether theater, musician, painter, writer. We all go through this period where we are discovering who we are, which will lead to the art we make. Because it all ties back down to, who am I? What art am I making? Who am I speaking to? Even in this one song I wrote when I was 17, I wrote, I Don't Know Me Anymore. And that song came because I remember I was very religious. I was a religious zealot. I would carry my Bible to school. It was doing too much at that point.
Yeah.
It was too much. I was like, oh girl. I went through other things too, but I learned that my dad always told me, you can't force people to come to God. You are not God. If you can't manage yourself, how do you expect to manage other people? And I remember I was 16 after going through a depressive suicidal episode. I was 16 and I said, okay, whatever song that I'm going to make, I'm going to make it, I'm going to listen to me. Because I thought in order to be a good singer, I would have to make Christian music, because I was taught if it's not of God, then it's not going to be good. And so I'm making music, and then a year passed and I'm sitting down. I was writing songs, but none of them spoke to me like this one. And I said to God, and my ancestors, I said, can you please give me a song idea and I'll listen. And I was doing my homework and I heard this melody in my head. And I took out this paper and I started writing the lyrics. I don't know me anymore. Lost without a cause. I'm losing the sight of my dream. It's getting hard to see. It's like ever since then that happened, more and more music ideas has come. And I think when artists truly decide to stop fitting in a box that they were never intended to fix, that's when the real art comes,
I think that it's so powerful when you finally take that moment to ground into yourself. I was taking a screenwriting class and they asked what our why was behind why we write. And I was like, well, I write because I was told that I could. Like someone just went like, you'd be good at that. And my Capricorn high ability kid brain went, oh, someone's already told that we're good at that and we hate failing, so we might as well do this. And so I had to go back and I had to like look at outlines and look at scripts and whatnot. And finally I went, I write because I want to tell the story of women and I want those women to be complicated. And I want to honor the women like my mother and my aunts and my grandmothers who had to put up with so much so I could write these stories down and be a person who fights against things like misogyny and racism and homophobia and things like that. I go, my writing honors women, full stop. At the end of that, there's also because I'm a comedy writer and I'm like, and I'm going to make fun of men, misogyny, and patriarchy along the way because when their fragile egos get real mad, nothing makes me happier. Nothing makes me happier than to watch a fragile man break.
How did you ever get anyone to, I'm asking you from advice, like how did you ever get anyone who tried to discourage you from tapping into that?
You know, it's growing up in the Midwest, in like small town Midwest USA, you get taught that they're like, you're not really discouraged, but you're not encouraged. It's just kind of like this middle ground where it's like, well, the special people get to do that. The special people get to make art, and you just wake up one day and everyone knows that you're special. And if you haven't been called special yet, then you get a regular person's job. You get to be a teacher or a doctor or whatever. And it's the special people that get to write and make music and sing and be in movies and things like that. So, you know, my Harry Potter Hogwarts letter never came in the mail to be like, it's you, you're special. And, you know, and so I was never encouraged to view myself as an artist, as a creative. And then my dad has told me, because with podcasting and writing about misogyny and how misogyny affects our culture, while also being a person who lives under capitalism and needs a day job, he has asked me, well, do you think it's what you talk about and the things that you post about online that make you unhireable? Like they look into you and they think that you're going to be a lot because of the feminism and the podcast and it all. And I went, that's not a fault in me. That's a fault in the system that I'm talking about. Like if men are going from my LinkedIn to my Instagram and going, whoa, she loves women of all people. And then they're not hiring me. Or if an exhausted woman who's living under patriarchy comes to my page and is like, oh my God, she's just going to be a ball buster in this office all day. And that's going to annoy the men who will eventually annoy me. That's not actually my flaw. That's the flaw in the system. It's the flaw of the system that I'm talking about. So yeah, it's weird how insidious and discouragement comes through and how also the way that I get discouraged is that no one wants to be in conversation with me about what I'm doing except for my other creative friends. So if I'm talking about a script that I'm writing or a podcast episode that I'm producing or a new creative connection I've made, the answers I get normally are, well, I don't know anything about that. And then it's like, full stop. We're not going further. We're not asking questions. It's so the unspoken thing is, I don't know anything about that. And I don't want to know anything about that. And then the unspoken thing beyond that is, which means I don't actually want to know anything about the work you're doing.
That's so annoying. And, you know, honestly, the thing that annoys me is there's always going to be those group of people, especially people you would think that would support you. They don't even support you when it comes to that. And it's just annoying. I'm sorry, I just brought up a memory. I'm just like,
no, I have a fantastic uncle, one of my mom's brothers, where it doesn't matter what you sit down to talk to him about. Because he's so knowledgeable, he's read a book about it. He's listened to an NPR episode about it. He just saw Jon Stewart talk to you about it. And he loves to dive deep in with you. So I told him I had just like wrapped up my sitcom writing class or whatever. And he was like, well, you know, Natalie, I just listened to an NPR. Nope, it was a book. I just read a book, and I think it was a nonfiction book. I think it was a memoir. And one of the characters, it revolved around several people. And one of the people just talked the entire time about how writing is something that you have to do, but it's something that kills you and tortures you the entire time that you're doing it. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, so how do you combat that? And I told my mom, I go, that was the first time anyone's asked me that shares my DNA what my process looks like and how I get over blocks and why the work is important to me and whatnot. I go, y'all sit on, that's cool, Natalie. And then you leave it there.
And that's such an awesome feeling. I have some family members who work with creatives in our group too, and they would ask me, they're like, what are you working on? And it is a good feeling because, like, not having people who support you, it is really helpful. It is. And I feel like to have people who will always be there for you, not just saying, oh, good job, but actually, hey, what is something I can do? What do you need for this project to happen? What resources can I show you? It's amazing. So.
And I think one of the ways that white supremacy keeps hold of things like music and art and television and things like that is it has us convinced that because everything has to be making money, everything has to look the same. So they'll keep so they'll keep making Marvel movies until the day that I die because Marvel movies make money.
Yeah.
Grey's Anatomy will keep putting out episodes till probably literally I or Shonda Rhimes dies. And it's because they're like, well, it works and it's making ABC money. And I talk about that all the time. I go, when we focus on the money, everything's so boring. The Marvel movies have become so sanitized and boring. And I think the last one that I even felt anything for was Black Panther and then Wakanda Forever, the sequel.
Absolutely.
And it's a joy that we even got those two movies made in White People USA Disneyland.
Yes. You know, that's so true because capitalism does kill originality. It forces people to do things out of survival. And when you don't have the means to do it, or even like for me, where I live now, it's great. But growing up, I've seen things in bad neighborhoods. I've seen people who were strung out or even they died early because of, things that occurred there. And it's sad because I was telling my boyfriend yesterday, I said, there's so many brilliant people in these projects, quote unquote projects, the hood, but they're most likely, they are never going to be recognized because either someone will take their talent, use their voice or their artistry and mask it as their own, and they won't have any money to fight a lawsuit because it's harder and harder to navigate that. Or they probably do want to become musicians, but they don't have the resources to do so because of situations that makes it harder for them to access it. And I really say white supremacy is the death of it really is the death of other civilizations when you think about it, because even like the hair project, I was told, I remember I was working in this one store, they told me for wearing my afro, I can wear that because that will make the customers uncomfortable. Taught to use perms and relaxers that can cause cancer later on. It literally creates death to everything. Even music too. Music that sells in mainstream for Black Americans, anything that's derogatory, you rarely see Black artists nowadays making, you have them there, but they're not as propelled in the media as opposed to artists who rap about vulgar stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that, Art doesn't have a limit, but it becomes a problem when you limit other artists to propel something that takes other people back, I don't know if that makes sense. And I don't know. I feel like I'm not making sense.
And I think, as a white person in America, the one thing that would be the most dangerous for me to do is to not enter conversations and to not talk openly about how white supremacy has killed culture and cultures in our lifetime. And, one time at book club, we read The Other Black Girl, and they had just adapted it for Hulu. And the twist of The Other Black Girl is that they were dullifying the Black culture out of these women through hair product. And I was sitting with a bunch of white people, and I was like, that's so interesting. I go, the metaphor is so strong there because of how our culture and how our country views Black women's hair, blank faces. And I'm like, I was like, oh, do you guys not know about the hair movement and Black women reclaiming the rights to wearing their natural hair and stuff? Blank faces. And I was like, oh no. And I've had other white people tell me before, well, I'm not comfortable about talking about that because someone from that culture isn't representing the culture here with us. I go, so we as two white people can't talk about how we've ruined things, because I'm ready to talk about how we've ruined things.
I love that. First of all, thank you for being an advocate for us. I think it really does make me happy to see that as someone who isn't afraid to speak up as politics, especially as someone who benefits from the system. You don't have to do that, but you chose to do that, and I appreciate that. Because I hate when people say that, when I was in 8th grade, someone said that, why do we still have to learn about slavery? That happened a long time ago. And growing up in a predominantly white area from a good quarter, 2/3 of my life, I'm 20. So hearing the words that, oh, you're a monkey, you wear horsehair, the N-word, you can imagine how a Black girl who not only is told many times of how she's ugly because of her dark skin, her Afrocentric features, but see TV shows as well that cast dark women as the disposable Black girl trope. It really does break your self-esteem. And it took me a long time to reclaim my roots, even separating myself from Christianity, because it was hard for me to stomach a religion that said yes to, it was hard for me to accept Christianity knowing that my ancestors didn't have a right to practice their own. They were stripped from it. And I don't like it because it all circles back to art. How you portray people. If you're portraying stereotypes to each race, if I'm just portraying a stereotype to this person, or to this person, everyone knows TV influences people. That's why during the Super Bowl, they paid millions of dollars to influence people. If I'm growing up, especially in an era where I'm not exposed to different people of different races, and I'm only seeing this TV show that shows that person of a different race, that's going to impact my mind over time, me thinking that's how they act, right? And this is why we need DEI. A lot of people say DEI is not important. DEI makes other voices heard. It doesn't eliminate one voice. So there's no such thing as, oh, this is the only right way. And I know it sounds like I'm talking gibberish, but hear me out. Do you know that one verse in Christianity says, I'm the way, the truth, and the light? Okay, so take that concept, right, and think about how white supremacists, they went to most countries. They went to India, they went to Asia, they went to Africa. They forced into the Americas as well, the indigenous, right? They told everyone to adopt their customs and taught them to strip themselves because they had the answer to everything. And when you think about even this whole conspiracy thing with aliens and stuff, like aliens, I don't believe in aliens. I don't want to believe in aliens, okay? But when you think about how the concept of aliens, they come to Earth, they colonize, they destroy, they do all these things. It's really a projection of everything that has been done in history. And I don't hate white people. I don't want people to think, oh my God, she hates white people now. I don't hate white people. I love white people. I don't like white supremacists. Because even through art, slaves weren't allowed to sing sometimes. Because when they would sing, I learned something. When they would sing or even braid their hairs in a form of fashion as a way to escape, singing was a sign. Whenever, I forgot what specific song list, but whenever someone was about to escape or prepare for a revolt, they would sing to God as a way to come together before they were prepared for the battle. That's why when people say, even a controversial take, that art is not important. If you're majoring in art, you're an idiot. No, art is important. It may not be important to think that, oh, it's the quickest way to get rich scheme. But if you can't understand ethics, you can't understand humanities, how the hell you think you're going to be able to be a doctor when they start cutting corn and saying that, oh, you can't be a doctor because you're not from this country, or you can't be a doctor because you're black, therefore you're underqualified. It affects us all.
And this whole idea of classical music always belonged to white people because we only heard about the white people who made classical music. I tell people all the time that the education that we are delivered as children is purposeful, and its purpose is to keep us comfortable with white supremacy and misogyny and all of the things that got Trump into office and Elon Musk rich and Jeff Bezos rich and all of it. Gone are the days where some hippie, well-meaning teacher has the time to radicalize her fourth graders. Like that teacher on recess, she's tired and she's not allowed and she's got to teach to tests and she's got to, her entire paycheck revolves around whether or not her test scores prove that she's a good teacher. And they do not take into consideration how many of your kids are on free and reduced lunch, how many of your kids are coming from an okay home emotionally, physically, and mentally. And no, it's all about output. So of course we never knew that Black people made classical music. It doesn't go along with their narrative. We have to seek out that information.
Yeah. And that's something I also figured out. In order to keep stereotypes alive, they have to manipulate situations that are aligned with the stereotypes. Black people are uneducated. Well, you killed our ancestors for them to educate themselves. Black people, they're quote unquote aggressive. Well, I mean, imagine being forced in a situation for hundreds of years where you were abused to the most brutal forms of fashion and was told that if you were to fight back, you would go to hell. How do you think that affects the mind? That's warfare, not just physical warfare, but psychological warfare, biological warfare. When they stripped Black farmers from money, took their food, land away from them, all sorts of things. And then let's not even get into the medical warfare of the Tuskegee experiments, of what they did to Black prisoners. And I don't believe in, Black people are better than white people. No. I think the problem is, because I believe I wasn't taught to hate others by my parents. My parents told me, you love everyone, you love and treat everyone equally. I think the problem is white supremacy created a safe space for mediocrity to thrive, that whenever someone exceeded, they punished them for it. They strip, because think about it. Even you notice how they go to every country they went to, whether the Americas, they had gold, spices, Asia, they had ivory, India, I forgot. I know they have something because they
had dyes. They made the dyes for and silk.
Yes.
Yes. I have a friend who's a historical costumer. I'm like, I know what's in India. It's the silk.
I love India, hands down. But every country they went to, it was because they were looking for something, because they didn't have it on their own. And I think over time, because I learned about European Renaissance. Mm-hmm. I took honors in Italian. I also learned about it in middle school, right? And you learn about how Romans and even Greeks, and I could be wrong, they operated in warfare to the point where they were killing each other up. So they looked to other countries to regain themselves. And in the process, they got so used to forcing people to do the work for them that they didn't want to thrive. They didn't want to become exceptional. Because if I convince someone that they're not good, and that they stop trying, and that they stop believing in themselves, I'm elevating myself in the process. And so, I don't know, it's too deep. I'm sorry I got too political, but I'm so passionate about this topic. And I will say something else. Even Beyonce doing country music, I felt like her bringing those Black country artists, that was so beautiful, because there are Black people who have done country music before Beyonce, but you never really see them highlighted in that moment. And it hurts because a lot of people, I think I speak for many Black women when I say this, and Black men as well, but Black women because I'm a Black woman. I speak for us when we say this. A lot of people think of us as angry, and we are, but it's not because we want to be angry. We aren't just born. No one is born angry.
Right.
Okay. No one is born angry. And there are some things I have to heal from. When I was a kid, I always wondered why people would be like, oh, I can't believe this, white supremacy, this, white supremacy, that, but I understand it. You can't, and that's the problem most people have. They get mad at us for speaking out a system, but you can't reprimand me for calling out a system when it's the same system that you benefit from. That's not fair. And that's why music is it's really important, even nowadays more than ever, because there's so much things going on. Music is the key to freedom. It always is. It has always been, and it always will be.
I'm going to move us into our closing ceremony. If you had to impart a lesson onto the listeners to be like, if I've learned one thing about my experience in creating and composing and studying classical music, it is this. What have you learned about our world or yourself through that process?
I learned not to. Okay, so I'll say this. I learned people who limit you limit themselves. And I say that because going into classical music, I was always told, oh, it's going to be hard. You're not a real music composer if you didn't take music lessons or if you play digitally, whatever, right? But I learned that classical music, when you think about itself, there's some classical music that's consistent, but if you listen to many classical music, it always starts off slow, fast, and then you're never just really bored when you're listening to classical music because it's always taking into a different route of the beat, you know? And that's how life is. Life isn't linear. Life isn't linear and you never know where you're going to go. So invest in yourself first, believe in yourself. And seriously, something that's been working on, if I was saying one last thing, take yourself seriously. Because if you don't, no one's going to take you seriously. So.
Right. I think my biggest takeaway from this conversation is I am reminded of a line that I have thrown out hundreds of times since she said it, but I stole this from Leah Khatib off of Love Island, where she said, that sounds a lot like white woman scared. And I've used that against white people. I'm like, that sounds like white people scared. Fear is part of the oppression. It's their number one tool. Trump willed it to become president, and now look at us all. And they made us afraid of the things that we don't understand. And that's what colonization was built upon. They went into other countries and immediately went, what if they don't like our way of living? Oh, we'll make them. And we're feeling those ramifications today. So if you feel uncomfortable listening or talking about these things, good. They're not comfortable subjects. Fight through it. Don't just be a white person scared your entire life.
Yes, silence is violence. It's so true.
Amen. Amen. Hallelujah. It's why every time my 7-week-old nephew is just staring into my soul like he needs me to say something. The other day, I told him how Britney Spears ended up in a conservatorship. I'm like, let me tell you how capitalism and white men got Britney in servitude in the house that she bought. Like, because if it can happen to Britney, it can happen to your gorgeous aunt. So we have to talk about it. Like, Brittany had way more money than me. And I was like, oh my God, anyone could be in charge of my medical records.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's so true.
What would be a manifestation and a hope that you would like to put out into the collective energy?
So one day, I want to win against my former self. Nothing. I say that because my former self was someone who would never have the courage to do things I'm doing now. Even going into music after dropping out and being told, oh, you're going to regret it or you're never going to be big. Telling myself that and other people telling me that. I would want to prove my former self wrong. So,
yeah. I think what I want to manifest is in these trying times where it all seems hopeless, I hope we find the hope to then just push the barriers, because if they're not going to pay us for anything, then we don't have to play by their rules. I've been saying in my writing classes, everything I write down is play until they want to pay me for work. And then I'll care about their opinions.
Period.
So I hope that we do see a big surge in creativity and people taking risks, because now is the time for people to be taking risks, because nothing matters. They're tearing everything down. So it's going to be us who have to build it up.
We're going to have to, our generation is definitely going to be have to want to build it up again. It's true.
Yeah. I mean, honestly. Toni, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for taking a chance on someone who reached out to you via TikTok.
Yes, no, thank you. And this is my first interview, so I'm sure you guys are probably
Make sure that all of the listeners know where they can find you and support you.
Yes, I'm streaming on all platforms. Music, you can find me under Lady Lytle. So that would be Lady, 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 and then Lytle's Leidel. And I'm on Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes as well. I'm on all streaming platforms, so.
Awesome. And I will make sure to link that all in the show notes. And then you can find us at Men I've Tolerated Pod on Instagram, and Natalie K124 on a bunch of different platforms that are my personal social medias that are also just open to people because we're just cross posting at this point. We're on YouTube, we're on Pinterest, we're on all of them. Just find us. And remember, tolerators, you don't have to smile through anything you're tolerating, including 3 white men who have used an abusive system to tell you that your work and your art isn't valued and isn't validated. Smiles are for joy.